everyone. Welcome to the panel segment of our event. For those of you that haven't seen me on the platform yet, my name is Rachel Mitchell, and I am the Director of Business Development for TorontoJobs.ca. And I'm joined by Jacqueline, who's the Global Recruiter of Rakuten Kobo Inc. So really happy that you could join us today. We are waiting for Prithvi, who is the technical recruiter from General Motors. He's not on yet, so hopefully he'll join us and I can let him in as the discussion goes on. So thanks again, Jacqueline, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So we are going to cover a lot of good content. So we're going to talk to Jacqueline about kind of how COVID's affected her hiring in her organization, about virtual interviews, which has become kind of the norm now in the recruitment world or the recruitment industry. We're going to talk a little bit about resumes and what she's looking for from a recruiter's perspective. If anyone has any questions as we go along, we really urge you to ask as many questions as you would like. We'll try to get to most of them. If it's a question that we're not covering, we will definitely try to cover it as we go along here. So on the stage chat, you'll see that's where you can ask questions. So I see that some people are already asking questions, which is great. So yeah, go ahead, ask questions as we go along. But I want to start out just by having Jacqueline introduce herself, introduce her organization, and maybe talk a little bit about how you got into recruiting.
Absolutely. So I work for Rakuten Kobo. So for those who don't know, we are an e-commerce company focused around e-reading. So we have e-reading devices. We have a self-publishing platform for both ebooks and audiobooks. And we have a great mobile and web app where people can access ebooks and audiobooks with different subscription platforms on an a la carte basis. And we are headquartered here in Toronto in Liberty Village, but we operate globally. So we have customers in 190 countries. We have offices as well in Ireland and in Germany and remote employees. So we're about mid-sized. We're about 430 globally. And I think about 300 of those are here in Toronto in terms of our employee base.
Wow, so, yeah. That's amazing. That's great. So have you always been in tech recruiting?
I have. I've always been in tech recruiting. So I graduated from Laurier with a BBA, and I specialized in international business. And then after that, my first role in recruiting was at Tech Systems, which is an IT staffing agency. So that was kind of my first dip into the technical recruiting realm. And agency was fun. It was definitely different than internal recruiting. So after a year and a bit, I went internal. I worked at an ad tech company doing technical recruitment there. And now I'm at Kobo, and I've been here for almost 3 years now.
That's amazing. That's great. That's a nice transition into such a large organization. I'm sure that, being Kobo, you are in the digital space, like you're saying, it's e-commerce. How have you been impacted in terms of recruiting, like that you're doing internal recruiting by the pandemic? Like I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes and shifts. And I just hosted an HR event, and I was saying to the people that were on the panel on that event, it's like you've had to wear so many hats and shift so many gears if you're in a position of HR. It's not even just about changing the strategies and the structures. It's also about, keeping people safe and your employees having 9 million questions about working from home or your COVID vaccination program and all these different things that HR has had to deal with. I think it's probably one of the hardest, other than being a business owner, positions in an organization right now. So maybe you can speak a little bit about how it impacted you, what changed, and then I kind of want to go into virtual interviews after that. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how that changed for you.
Definitely. So it's impacted the business in every way. Kobo has done really well due to the pandemic. We've had 2 of our best years ever. People are at home reading, creating content. So with that, we've actually had a huge ramp up in hiring and bringing on additional roles, especially within our R&D department, these technical roles for people to help with our apps, with our core systems, all of that. So we never had a lull. I know some companies, had a pause where there was uncertainty. We've always been kind of guns blazing, hiring a lot, which is exciting. And so it's changed a lot, both in terms of the hiring manager experience and the candidate experience. And so as an HR professional in recruitment, it's a lot of figuring out, okay, how can I train my hiring managers now to pivot the experience and how they assess candidates, especially in terms of team fit, culture fit over Zoom. And then also how we can provide a great candidate experience to the people we're meeting with and really sell our our culture, which is one of the greatest things about Kobo, which when we bring them into the office, you can see it, you can feel it. Whereas how do we portray that now over video? So I actually worked with another one of our, my team members, our HR specialist, Lisa, and we created or we redid something we previously done, which is interview training for managers. And that's, okay, how do you prep for interviews? How do you make candidates feel more comfortable? What does that look like? Because, previously you'd walk into the office, have some small talk, grab them some water, ease people's nerves a bit, whereas you don't have that now. And as a candidate, you feel a little bit more stiff or awkward without that icebreaker. And so many things to be mindful of. I feel like I might be rambling.
No,
How
this
can
is
I
amazing.
specify further?
Amazing
There's so many
information.
things that we try and do.
No, it's amazing information. So for someone that's watching that really wants to get into, like, it's probably is somewhat of a privilege to work for a company like yours. It's an international organization. They're probably wondering how you got the role. From people looking outside that are looking for a role. So, what are you looking for, like, from a technical perspective? You've posted a job, let's just say, as a software developer. Do you hire
Mhm.
for software developers? I should ask
Yes.
first.
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got someone that wants to apply to a role that you have open for a software developer. How do they get noticed? I know the common thing when we host, because we host job seeker events too, where they can, you know, um, ask questions and information. And I think the biggest question is always, well, does my resume go into a black hole when I apply online?
Mhm.
Does it go through? How does it get through the ATS system, or are there actual physical recruiters looking at my resume? So I know every recruiter is going to have a different answer, but when you work for a larger organization that's international like yours, I'm sure there's different procedures and things that you follow to try to get that perfect candidate. So maybe you can describe what that looks like. I'm a software developer and I'm applying to your role online, on your careers page, let's say. How does it
Mhm.
get looked at? What's the process after my resume gets submitted?
Yeah, good question. So a couple points that I think are worth noting. So first off, when you want to make your resume as succinct as possible, 1 to 2 pages max, but I feel like for the most part, you really can fit what you need to get across on one page, because it can be off-putting when you have a huge, 4 or 5 or 15. We have a lot of 15-page resumes that come through,
I
and the
bet.
first couple of pages are just every single tech stack that they've ever touched or looked at. And then as a recruiter, it's time consuming to sift through that. Okay, they have it listed on the first page, but where have they actually used it? Have they used it recently? And so my advice is to take a look at the required tech stack that you see in the job description, and then make sure that's very visible in your resume, not only in a general sense, but where have you used it? And then if need be, tailor your resume accordingly. I want to be able to look at it and see where you've used those technologies. Even if it was just, just touching them, just mention that. And so I'm a big proponent, especially within more technical roles. I don't need to see a big about me blurb. I don't really need a cover letter. I just want to see things you helped do and accomplish and how you used certain tools. And that's the easiest way to stand out. And then also just from a technical standpoint, when we have a lot of resumes for jobs, certain jobs will get hundreds and hundreds of resumes. So we'll use what we call Boolean search, and we'll literally search certain technologies, and then we'll look at the resumes that have they're not listed. You might not even get seen right away, especially when we have so many to look through. Yeah.
No, that's great. You touched on a couple things that I just want to touch on. So you mentioned, and this is a big thing for me, and I mentioned it when I did the opening remarks, as one of my big points of having that quantitative information so that people can see, examples rather than saying I'm proficient in Excel or so from a candidate perspective, they only have, so much room on their resume. But from a
Mhm.
recruiter's perspective, especially if I'm I hire a lot for marketing roles and things like that. I really want to see how they contributed to their past organization, or how many clients they were managing, or things along those lines. I want to see success rates and percentages, and how that they can really bring what they can really bring from those skills to the organization. I mean, anyone can say I'm proficient in Excel, or
Yeah.
I have Java experience. Like, anyone can write that on their resume. So what are your recommendations for how to really portray that? If it's not if you have a cover letter, it's a lot easier to tell a story. But I am totally of the mindset, and I agree with you, that cover letters are becoming a thing that people just don't really read anymore, depending on the role. I mean, if you're
Depending on the
applying for a
role.
journalism role or an HR role, it might be a little bit more important so they can see your writing skills and how
Mhm.
your thought process works. But from a technical perspective, which is why we're here today, you're right. It's that search on those keywords, and it's also, how do they show though that they were really successful? How do they show that those skill sets were being utilized, and how they can bring them to your organization? Like what would be some of the standout things you would recommend?
I think it's hard to say because it depends on the role, but I think just in general, like you said, like I want more, instead of just listing it, more quantifiable things, whether you were using a certain technology to maintain code, or whether you were writing new code, or, adding, it doesn't need to be a paragraph explanation. It could literally be, a 6-word jot note about what you did with it, but just try and create as much context as you can with how you used it. And even if you use it just a little bit, like if I read that, I know that going into the call, it's better than you listing it and me thinking that you might be, an 8 or 9 out of 10 in that particular skill set or language. And then you'd be like, oh yeah, no, I didn't, like, I only used it for like certain little things. So providing context is the most helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Um, so yeah.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. So, what is do you have an out of the box interview question that you ask during your interview process? Like something that catches people off guard, or what's your favorite interview question that you ask when you're interviewing someone?
Oh, that's good. I try not to keep things too out of the box for myself. I try to keep it more
Sure.
informal and be more of like a partner, but I can walk you through the questions that I do ask.
Sure.
Um, in this, I'll always have more role specific questions that I'll ask, but in terms of when I'm assessing candidates, and I'm not a technical person, I do technical recruiting, but I don't pretend to know,
Sure.
how to be a developer. So I want to know a bit about yourself. I want to know about your career goals. I want to know what your ideal next role looks like. Like, I'm impressed when a candidate can really paint me a picture of what they want to do next, even if just like what excites you. What would you like to learn in your next role? If there's a new technology that you'd love to learn more about, tell me about it. Things like that. I want to know what makes you interested in working for Kobo and why you applied. And that's just, did you do your research? Are you actually kind of somewhat prepared and invested in our call that we have today, which shows me just a lot of off resume type of things. And then, what makes you looking for your new job? And then honestly, more important to me than the questions I ask is I like to assess what kind of questions candidates are asking me. I think that tells me a lot. Again, how interested and excited are they? They really thinking critically about themselves in this role? Are they prepared? Are they, not prepared? Are they just asking, oh yeah, what's the salary? Or do they have honest questions that show that they're invested in this process and excited about seeing themselves at the company?
Yeah, that's great. Those are some great questions, and I think goals and really, that's very important to see the direction that they want to go, and the longevity that kind of dictates the longevity too with the organization. And there's a lot of amazing questions that job seekers can ask. You can ask about the culture. You can ask
Mhm.
about the potential of the next role, or how they can grow within the organization. And there's hundreds and hundreds of questions that are out there that and it does, like you're saying, show that they're interested. They've done a little bit of homework. They want to know just as much about your organization as you do about them. I think it's equally as important. So kind of going through the interview questions on the other side of it, I've seen, we do a lot of recruiting. I talk to a lot of clients on a daily basis about kind of the experiences they're having with this whole virtual interview process. So it's very new,
Mhm.
it's not new anymore, but it was very new at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I think that the stat is 10% of employers were doing pre-screening through virtual, like through Teams,
Mhm.
or if they had their own system, or Skype. I know we were using Skype, a long while back. Now everything is about Zoom. And I think there's about 80% of interviews taking place through some sort of digital media. So, I think that people, you think it's easy to do, but it's really not. Like when I started doing these events, and I said this during the opening remarks, it was, learning to look at the camera instead of looking at the box. So I'm looking like I'm making
Mhm.
eye contact, and I had done a practice event and I recorded it and I watched myself, and it's like the worst thing you can do, but it was so helpful to see, my mannerisms and how I was moving around and saying or like or all those different things, and I really corrected myself. So my kind of advice to job seekers at the beginning of this event was, when you're doing these virtual interviews, really prepare yourself. Like, get a friend online on Zoom. It's free to have an account, record your meeting, do some mock interview questions, and really look at yourself, watch what you did, how you were interacting, that sort of thing, so that you're really prepared. Because it is a much different, I feel like I'm talking to you, but it's very different than being in person. You can't read people's body language. We don't have the
Yeah.
same kind of eye contact. So there's that, there's the camera, there is obviously, the setting that you're in, making sure it's a professional. I've actually interviewed candidates that you could see their messy closet, or they had,
Mhm.
like racks of dishes in the background. And it's like, just clear it out and have a very professional space, because that speaks to, the type of person you are and how organized you are and those types of things. What would be kind of your key things when you're interviewing candidates virtually, because it is difficult? What are you kind of looking for? Maybe some advice that you have for how people can really prepare for something like that.
Yeah, I think advice just in terms of a general checklist, some of the things you're mentioning, make sure your background is clear, make sure that you have a good connection. Something that I advise that's helpful is, if you're going to have an interview and you have, family or roommates with you, maybe ask, hey, can you like pause what you're doing or streaming for the next 30 minutes to an hour so I don't have any connection issues? Make sure everything's charged. If you have, two screens, make sure you're directing at one, or say, hey, I have this that I'm referring to on this screen, just so you don't look distracted. Mute all devices and everything. And then in terms of when you're actually communicating, speak a bit slower. And then with that, when the people are asking you questions, do not be afraid to take a second, listen, and respond, especially over Zoom where there can be a lag or it might be harder to hear you. Take a second to really think about your response. You're not going to be judged for that, and you'll be able to respond better instead of feeling rushed. Um, those would be, I guess, the main general tips.
Yeah, no, that's great. And my other one is, sometimes you'll get an interview request, or sometimes I get meeting requests and I forget to accept them. So make sure when you're getting the email, you're accepting that invitation. And if you don't have Teams downloaded, or maybe Kobo uses their own software, where you need to have it downloaded, or you need to practice, or you have a password and you're not scrambling at 3:59 when you have an interview at 4 o'clock to try to download the technology, or find the password in your email, or you didn't accept the invitation, so you're accepting the interview invitation at 4:15 or 3:59, and the interviewer might not even know that you were going to attend the interview because you didn't accept it in the first place. So all of these different things, I mean, make sure you're logged in early, like 10 minutes early. You've tested it the day before, you've accepted the invitation. Make sure you have the software is compatible, because sometimes it's not compatible with Macs or with that type of thing. So make sure it's
Yeah.
compatible. So all these things are just very important. Some of them might seem like common sense, but when you get in the moment, I still do it. I had a meeting yesterday and my Mac was not working with Teams for some reason, and I had to pull out my other computer, but I should have just had the other computer ready to go, kind of thing. So just kind of thinking of these things. So we've got some questions, so hopefully we can go through those for the next few minutes or so. So what kind of questions do recruiters and interviewers love hearing from applicants? So thanks for asking that, Ahmed. That's a great question.
That is a great question. And I don't want to be general, because my general answer would be questions that are slightly out of the box or show that you put thought into them. And of course, a specific example is escaping my mind, but role specific or company specific questions, I think, again, show me you did your research, show me that you're interested and invested. But in general, the most common questions I get, which are questions I'm fine answering, are, what's the culture like there? How has COVID impacted not only the business, but the employees? And, what are you guys doing to help the pandemic? Which I think is an important question for you to ask your employers. What have they done? What are they continuing to do? What's their stance on return to work? What does that look like? You can ask them, what does success look like in this role? What do you foresee the challenges being in this role? That's a good question that I actually like answering. I like giving candidates a realistic idea of what to expect in the interview process, because it's never a fun feeling when someone starts and you're sold, an amazing, perfect job when realistically you have a job to solve business problems. So of course, with that, there's going to be challenges. So giving people a realistic scope of what those challenges are going to be. Um, Ask, why is the position open? Gives context. Ask about the team. What's the team size, the composition? Who does this roll into? I find that also gives you kind of a better idea of what to expect, the culture. Ask things like, what does communication look like at the company? How often does the team meet? How often do you guys have all hands calls, if at all? Things like that. There's no dumb questions. And I always say it's an interview both ways. You are seeing if this is a kind of team company role that you're interested in. So ask any question that you're interested in, that you want to know. Recruiter is your partner. I feel like recruiters get a bad rap for seeming like we want to, um, get you at a cheaper rate or, trick you into a role that it's not. I'm your partner. I want to hire you as bad as you want to be
Right.
hired. And so like act accordingly, treat them as your partner, help each other through the process. I want to answer whatever questions you have, and not holding back on questions you have is just kind of a disservice to you. So that would be my overarching
That's
answer.
amazing. Those are great questions. That was really good. So hopefully, Ahmed, that answered your question. That was great. So we have Prudence. I used to work in the troubleshooting area for devices and a customer service rep for the Kobo campaign in a third party company. Does this help me stand out in applying to Kobo?
Yeah, always when you work with us, even through another third party, that's always helpful. Mention that in your resume. And then the most helpful part of that would be if you have still connection, even on LinkedIn, with people who you worked with during that time who are still at Kobo. Reach out to them, say, hey, I'm interested in this role. Can you refer me? Um, Being a referral is the easiest way to get in front of a recruiter. And so it won't always pop up for me, especially if you worked through a third party when you worked for Kobo, but leverage those relationships and get referred. And then any recruiter within Kobo will automatically get an email. And that's the best way to stand out.
Great, great. So hopefully that answers your question, Prudence. And we have Joanna. Do you mind a virtual background or do you prefer a real room/background?
I I don't have in terms of like when I assess candidates, no preference. I don't care either way. My computer's too old to have a background. I've tried before, so I always just have to have it. I think it's kind of fun to see a background, and it helps you get to know them a little bit more. But in terms of preference, no preference there. It's a pandemic. I was working on my couch for a solid 3 months of the pandemic, so I feel like whatever works best for you in your living situation.
For sure. I find too sometimes the Zoom background makes your head look like it's I've tried to use them and they're very funny with the way
Yeah, it
that it
cuts your hair off a bit.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So these are all amazing questions. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask them. We have about 6 minutes left. I did want you, Jacqueline, if you could go through maybe some of the roles that you're recruiting for. I'm sure everybody would love to work for your organization. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the roles you're recruiting for and how people can apply, or maybe put the link to apply in the chat.
Absolutely. I think I have the link open right here. And there's a couple roles that I'll mention that aren't quite posted yet, but I'll also put my email. Oh no, where'd I go? There we are. So here's a link to our jobs board. If it wants to. So we do a lot of hiring, like I mentioned, mostly within our technical R&D department. And a lot of these roles we hire kind of on a consistent basis. We want to keep a constant pipeline of this strong talent that we're always looking for more. So some of those include we're hiring for a Java developer. We might be hiring for two actually. So a Java developer on our core systems team. That's an exciting role where when do we discuss monetary compensation? It's a good question. I'll answer that one right now so we don't run out of time. So I always talk about that on the first call. So especially once, entry level roles is a little different. I'll usually be pretty upfront with what the salary is for that. But beyond that, I very much expect candidates to provide me with the range of what they're looking for. So I will say, what compensation are you targeting in your next role? And provide the recruiter with a range. You best, practice as a job seeker, make the lowest part of that range, you know, the lowest you'd be looking for, like what you actually want. Because of course, when you see a range, the seeker sees one side, the recruiter sees the other side. But I want to see a range depending on, your skill set, the market value that you've assessed. I hesitate to be the person to give a number at that stage because um, say you are over our initial budget. I don't want to give you a number and you say, "Oh, well, I want more than that," and then pull out. If you're a strong candidate with skill set that would be valuable, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. And I also want to see candidates who are aware of, the market rate and what they're looking for. I need a number to fight for. Again, I'm your partner. I want to make you happy, and so be prepared with a number. I'll give you an idea of what our total comp looks like in terms of, base, bonus, stock options, which is what Kobo's comp always consists of. But yeah, on that first call is when I always bring it up. If other recruiters don't bring it up on that first call, I find that not super common. But if they do mention at the end, should we talk about compensation now, or do you want to wait till later stages? And then they'll tell you, and then you'll dive into it then. Um, that's my general answer without rambling on too much. But
No, you're definitely not rambling. You're giving so much good information, which is amazing. We have one more question that we can probably sneak in. So for interview questions, should we always keep our questions professional, or is there room for personal questions like hobbies, interests, sports, music, etc.?
definitely, I think those are great things. And like, I see people put it on their resumes if they have room for like a line that talks about their interests and hobbies. I think that's a perfect conversation starter. In my interview training that I give to our hiring managers, I say if they have things on those resumes, use that as an icebreaker, use that as something to chat about. I think that's great. And also, when you ask about company culture, some of those things might be mentioned. Like for us, we have a softball. Pre-pandemic, we would have a softball tournament every summer, or we have different clubs for cooking classes, or people who like cycling, or we have a movie club. So great things to talk about. I think it helps break the ice. It makes it feel more human. And yeah, for sure. And then also I'll add, when you're interviewing, ask your recruiter who you're going to be interviewing with, first and last name and a LinkedIn link, and have at least 1 to 2 questions prepared for every person you're going to be meeting with. Always have questions prepared. If not, many questions, and you might not get to them all, but most interviews, you're going to have a time period left where they're going to ask you, okay, what questions do you have for us? And even though it might be your second or third round, it never feels good as an interviewer, a hiring manager, to have a candidate who just has no questions. So always over prepare on questions to ask for the people you're going to be meeting with.
That's great. No, thank you so much for all that information. I think we got a lot of good content. So that was really amazing. So we are 1 minute left. I just want to thank Jacqueline for being here and representing Kobo. I mean, the organization sounds like an amazing place to work. You've included your email address, which is amazing, and the link so everyone can check out your careers page. I just want to say again, thank you so much to all of our speakers for being here today. We had a lot of amazing speakers sessions. We covered a lot of different topics, and hopefully everyone was able to take away a lot of points and information to incorporate into their job search. I think my biggest takeaway from today is goal setting. I think that is really important, whether you're working, not working, whether you're in a role, and even just for personal. I mean, it keeps things positive. It keeps you kind of reassured. It gives you something to work towards, especially with the pandemic. It's been hard for people to find jobs. So as long as you're working towards it and you've got goals and you're meeting those goals, it'll click for you eventually, and things are starting to open up. And I think tech never really shut down as much as a lot of the other industries and the ways that people were impacted. So kind of lucky on that front and that side of things. So again, this was presented by TorontoJobs.ca. I want to thank O1 Staffing for being here. If you haven't visited their booth yet, definitely do that. They have a lot of tech roles they're looking to fill. I want to thank ICTC for sponsoring the event today. Definitely check out. They've included their information, I think, multiple times in our chat. If not, maybe Sandra can, with information on how they can help you within your search and wage subsidy. And this was presented by TorontoJobs.ca. We have a lot of open positions, more accounting and finance, but sometimes we do get some tech roles. I know we are looking for a web designer, so UX designer. We are developing a new platform and we need someone full-time for that role. So if you're a UX developer or designer, you can definitely go to our website and find that link, or maybe Sandra can include it in the chat. And definitely check us out. We have a lot of different postings and we do a lot of content and help people as much as we can in the community with articles and blogs. And we've got over 100,000 followers on social media. So we do a lot of posts and things like that about all things jobs. So really appreciate all of our speakers. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jacqueline, for being here. We have one more job fair taking place before the end of the year on December the 1st. So if you would like to register for that, you can go to TorontoJobs.ca/news. So thanks again, Jacqueline, and thanks to everyone for being here. And we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.